Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about one of the endless number of injunctions from an activist judge in the United States that's attempting to block the Trump administration from deporting illegal aliens. Now, you think that the laws already exist on the statute books to say people can't enter the US illegally, and those that are illegal can be deported. So it's not a matter of requiring new laws or something like that. The law is already there, and the Trump administration is administering and enforcing the laws that exist on the statute books that were put there by the elected representatives in the Congress of the United States. So hardly anything sort of controversial in that. But yet, the activist judges are running endless and constant interference, trying to disrupt, prevent, delay the deportation of these illegal aliens. Now, there's now hundreds of cases of these activist judges doing this in one form or another. So we can put together now a very clear pattern that goes, and it goes like this: that any activist group, NGO, whatever, that has charity status. Why the FBI and the tax office in the United States haven't removed the charity status of these NGOs is quite beyond me, because they're able to operate with impunity and again tax-free, given their charity status. But they're able to go to pretty much any judge and get an emergency hearing. Now, this is important. This emergency hearing. Like if you want to, if I want to file a case with the court, I got to do the proper documentation, the paperwork. I got to attach the evidence and the proof, and you file the documents, and then in whether it be depending on the court, weeks, months, even years before you get a hearing. So you just have to wait it out and wait till your turn. But these NGOs can get emergency hearings. So they can come on midnight on Friday night, for example, and there's a certain judge on duty for during that time. Say a mass murderer is brought in, and they have to arraign them and do all the stuff real quick, but and detain them and so on. But they're meant to be there for emergency situations. The judge that's serving on weekends and nights, and but somehow the judges get out of bed at midnight and grant immediate injunctions to an NGO where there's no proper filing of paperwork or documents. There's no other party disputed or to consider that, nothing at all. It's just this activist turns up, hey, judge, stop Trump, stop evil fascist Nazi Trump. Yeah, sign here, done. And then, the judges, if you look at the time that the judge gets contacted and the time the judge signs on the document, they couldn't possibly have read or considered anything or waited. It's almost like a knee-jerk thing. They just sign and bang, bingo, there's an injunction there. And the government has to stop what it's doing and then respond legally to this thing. Now, if the judge were to say, no, I'm not hearing this, you file your documents in a proper time, you file your documents and I'll consider those documents in due course, or the next judge available to look at it will look at it and we'll get back to you in a few days' time or a week or whatever, or you damn well wait your turn and it'll be 6 months for it. If these NGOs were treated as other litigants are, then I wouldn't mind. But instead, they're given special access to the judge, and they only act and go to areas where a known activist judge will be on duty at that time. And because of the time, midnight on a Friday, the government isn't able to respond quickly or at that time. So it's obviously a stacked deck. It's marked cards, and they're able to do this same pattern time and time again. And there's nothing and nobody who seems to be prepared to call it out and stop them, or say, no, you can't have these emergency. No. And the conditions and circumstances and parameters of what constitutes an emergency hearing, that needs to be defined. A bunch of hysterical race hustler, grifter activists turn up at a judge at midnight and say, hey, stop, do this, do that. And they get instant approval. Not I'll think about it for a week or so. Instant approval on the spot. in what clearly is a pre-arranged and pre-organised gig. So that really needs some attention from the authorities on what constitutes an emergency, and can a judge just sign off it on midnight on a weekend or something? That's in my view, that's a huge subversion of the legal process. Anyway, they get now. What's interesting with the judge, just a few days ago, another activist judge said that the Trump administration couldn't deport a bunch of illegal aliens from some place or area, and the judge said, well, these people are desperate people fleeing persecution, and fleeing this and fleeing that, and each one of them has a right to due legal process to argue and prove their case. That's an absurdity, obviously, but okay, well, why wasn't due legal process applied when they wanted to enter the country? We won't worry about that. Well, what about the due legal process of the government to put their case? Bullshit, I don't care about that. So how do you know these people? If these people are yet to prove their case of fleeing persecution, as you, judge, have just said, then and they need due legal process, a court case, to argue and prove their case. Why? Well, how can you be claiming that they are fleeing persecution, where at the same time you're claiming they have to prove that they're fleeing persecution? How can it be both at the same time? So you could just blanket say that 1 million people are fleeing persecution without any evidence or proof or anything at all. I mean, where's your evidence on that? And why is it the due legal process? Why are they entitled to due legal process on a causation factor of fleeing persecution that they haven't yet proved? So how does that work? And you're granting an injunction on the basis they are fleeing persecution when there's been no case or no evidence that they're doing anything of the sort. So clearly the judge is a rabid activist, but notice how a very high burden of proof is being placed on the government, whereas a zero burden of proof is being placed on the the illegal aliens. Now again, we're moving into the territory of protected group, oppressed group. Why should they have to prove anything? The group with the most social power should have to be the one that bears the full and total burden of proof, whereas the victim group should have no burden of proof to meet, and they can say and declare anything they want. Now, this is something that I noticed, 30 years ago or something, in the divorce courts, that the victim, the oppressed victim is the woman, and the evil oppressor, Nazi fascist Hitler, is the man, and so the man must meet a very high burden of proof. And certainly the court cases that I looked at, the judge would be able to just put a high burden of proof on the man, but if the man met that burden of proof, the judge would simply ratchet up the proof burden just a few more notches until the man couldn't meet that burden, that very, very high burden of proof, and then say, well, that's it. I can just dismiss everything you say and do because you didn't meet this burden of proof that I can just arbitrarily introduce. Well, what about the burden of proof on the other side? No, she doesn't meet him, but she's the social victim, you motherfucking Nazi. Why should she have to meet any burden of proof? So, and this same sort of structure and paradigm, this same model of jurisprudence, when you apply it into other areas, well, these people are fleeing persecution, they're victims. They don't have to prove anything. You, Donald Trump, you damn fucking fascist KKK Nazi swastika Hitler, you have to prove, and you must prove it to the highest of high burdens. And so this is the game that's played, and why this is allowed to continue is quite beyond me, and why there aren't laws being passed or even Supreme Court verdicts being made that's okay. I mean, judicial oversight of the government, fine, nothing wrong with that. We want that. That's a good thing. But when it's done by activists that don't apply the burden of proof equally, or can simply invent it, these people are all fleeing persecution. Yeah, how do you fucking know that, Judge? You don't. You lying fuck. And this is something that should be, you activist lying fuck. This is something that really does need to be dealt with, because it's now become how justice is administered all across the Western world. And it's something that is subverting the judicial system out of all proportion. And I made just a couple of notes here so I can add some comment. on this, as I just looked at the yeah. So here's the judge saying that a million or so people, they're all fleeing persecution, and they're fleeing discrimination, but no court cases have been. But this is in the filing from the NGO. The NGO says, we believe, we think, we reckon that they're fleeing persecution. But the NGO doesn't have to prove its case. The NGO merely needs to come in and make an allegation, and the judge then signs off on the injunction and grants the injunction within minutes of the NGO sort of coming to them again at midnight on a Friday. And this whole round robin of activist bullshit with judges and NGOs and so on, all working together. The World Economic Forum, George Soros uniting, they're all in this. Their hands are all totally covered in excrement all around on this, and they're all working in tandem to achieve this subversion. Now they have to go to the legal thing because that's the only thing that can stop the government from doing the deportation, and that's the only interest they have. We've got to stop these deportations of brown people. But going through the causes, the NGO causes, well, Trump wants to make America more white. That's it, injunction. What's the evidence you have for that? Well, actually none, but that's the race hustler language we want to use. But they're finding judges sign. Now, a judge worth two pieces of shit, a pinch of shit, wouldn't sign off on something like that, and wouldn't allow these hustler grifters to do some midnight bullshit, raid on the legal system. But here we are, and this is what they're doing, and they believe not only are they permitted to do it, but they're righteous and good by doing this subversion. But again, the burden of proof that they have to meet is zero, because, well, we all know Trump is a Nazi and Hitler. So what's this burden of proof crap we have to meet? He is the one that has, and that mentality permeates all these legal interactions, and it's absolutely insane. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.